Overview, what we're going to try to hit today. Physical education remains the only curricular area required by federal law for every student with a disability. It's also the best kept secret in the state of Iowa. This is a very old law, but it is the only curricular area required by federal law for all kids with disabilities for really good reasons. So I'm hoping what this session will give you is a lot of resources to know how you might use the IEP process to advocate for your kids and to get and use the IEP process to address physical education for your kids. So who am I and how do I connect to this content area? And I tend to talk fast. We're a small group, so feel free to interrupt me at any time because the idea is that I answer your questions. So my name is Griffin. I'm an APE for short, which stands for Adapted Physical Education, which means I monkey around a lot. I do, pretty much I get paid to play. My expertise is motor development, play development, games, skills, of course the content area being physical education, and then of course unique learners. So the kids that are in the buildings as well as every teacher. So my job, I work in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, out of Grantwood Area Education Agency. It's an area of great passion and huge needs. So like I said, not only learners are unique, but my job is to work with phys ed teachers because in Iowa, our state department says if you have 1 3-hour class in adapted physical education, you're licensed to provide specially designed instruction to every student who comes through the doors of the public schools in physical education, whether that's a specially designed setting or an inclusive setting. So 1 3-hour class. So my job is to work with phys ed teachers and to help bridge that gap. So what do I know about kids with disabilities and physical education and adapting that? And what do you know about physical education? And so we work in the gap. So pretty much I get paid to play, which is a really good gig. Like I said, I work area-wide, so I work in 7 counties, 32 school districts, about 250 PE teachers, about 8,000 identified kids, about 1,200 of those students have significant disabilities, which is like my wheelhouse. You see a very colorful brain on there because I'm kind of a brain junkie. I understand that we are all individual and unique, just like our fingerprints, because of our brain, which is wired both based on our genetics and our experience. So I get to work with lots of unique brains, which I love, and I love puzzles. So lots of years of experience, and of course, I have 2 favorite things, shopping and toys. And shopping for toys is my all-time favorite. So I'll put some of that in as well. Why is this important? And what are the potential benefits? So we'll go through why is physical education important and what are the potential benefits? And you can't hardly miss that in the news anywhere these days. What does the law say about physical education? Like I said, best kept secret in the state of Iowa. Nobody in the schools will tell you that this is something that you should know about. And in fact, when I contacted Ask Resource Center and said, what information are parents provided about physical education and the piece of the IDEA that says that it ought to be provided, Ask said, well, we don't have any info on that. So it's by intention that you don't have any information, I think. And that is why I'm here today. So what about the law? Also, we didn't have much. Like I said, I've had this job for over 35 years, so I kind of know what's been going on in this state for a long time. It's not a new law, but we haven't really had anything that we could hold up to administrators and say, hey, look at this. So we now have a couple newish pieces of information that are helpful. And I'm going to go over just a little. So you have some handouts in front of you. You have one that says Got PE. That is actually a Google Doc. So all of you guys will get an electronic link to that. And I think afterwards I'll get everybody's email, but also Paula and Mari and Ashley will have that as well. So all of the things that are on there that are underlined are clickable links, so you can get to all of those documents, which is all of the backup stuff. The second page that you have that's a front and a back, that is actually from 2015, and that is from Iowa, and it gives kind of definitions and guidance. How many of you guys know that on every IEP, on the G page, there's a line that says physical education, and there's 3 boxes: general, modified, specially designed. Okay, until 2015, there was no definition anywhere in the state about what's general PE mean, what's modified mean, and what's specially designed mean. So they finally clarified that, and so I gave you the piece of the document that has that clarification. Most teams have not been in service on this, and the other thing is most physical educators have never been told this because they are general education and special education doesn't really in-service them. So yeah, Mari.
How do other people find out about this, or how would their local teams maybe know, or?
There's no good way to know. Okay. You just have to advocate and ask. Okay. So that's what I'm going to try to do today is give you tools to say, when they say, nope, this is what it is, then you can say no. For example, oh yes, go ahead. And that is the thing. So one, make friends with your phys ed teacher, connect them to your physicians. But honestly, phys ed teachers don't know either because they're hired out of general education and they provide special education. Most of them have no say whatsoever as to who comes to phys ed when. The kids just come into the gym and in whatever group they come in, and then the phys ed teacher is just supposed to figure out, what do I do? Many times they don't even, they're at a loss because they don't even know the kids as individuals.
But if it's, like my son had, with his eye condition, they had written no contact support, so that just blanketed out of everything.
Right.
Which is probably what yours says. Mm-hmm. But if the doctor writes that, for liability reasons, they have to follow that, and if contact sports and everything. So they have
depending on the level. Well, not only that, but then you also have to say, well, okay, so there's a whole lot of other activities that are non-contact. So how then you have to provide an alternative, and that is what districts have not done. So that's the third bullet point on there. What are the possibilities? And then how do you address that in IEPs or IFSPs? So the importance of physical education. It's huge. It's good for your brain and good for your body. And if we would pay more attention to physical education in this state, for sure, I think it would be good for everything. So John Rady, who is a neuropsychologist at Harvard Medical School, so it's not just Ann saying that this is good stuff. There's really very solid science behind this. He says that exercise is the single most powerful tool that you have to optimize brain function. That's for all of us all the time. The other conundrum with this is that teachers, and when I went to school, we weren't taught at all about brains. But that is what we're dealing with. So neuroscience does also need to inform instruction, and neuroscience is informing the whole field of physical education and neuroscience, and in particular, what does activity do for your brain? So for all of us, move it or lose it, move it and use it. What does physical activity do for your brain? It reduces stress, and stress inhibits learning. So we all know about that. If you're feeling stressed, you don't remember where your keys are, you run out without your stuff, that doesn't work so well. So exercise and activity reduces stress. It decreases anxiety. Physical education in itself can increase anxiety. We don't want that to happen, but what we do want is the kids to know that physical activity, safe physical activity that's enjoyable, does decrease anxiety. So it's a huge tool in your toolbox, not only for yourself personally, but for students or kids who experience anxiety. Exercise, it increases attention, concentration, memory. It's the only thing that actually causes brain cells to grow in your hippocampus as physical activity. It improves achievement. You would think we would want it more than once every 3 days or once every 4 days. It decreases discipline referrals, also another huge thing administrators love. It improves health, and healthier kids learn better. So there are lots and lots and lots of really good reasons that this was initially put in the law, that all kids should have physical education. Also, John Rady says exercise is as good or better than Prozac. So you can medicate yourself just by walking and moving and doing something. Yes. Exercise bikes, even stationary ones as well. Moving in any way does all of this stuff. and as good or better than Prozac. So that is from a Harvard medical guy. Also, there are two huge things that exercise does for your brain. So moving, it activates more of your brain than any other activity that we can do, and it leads to regulating our emotions, which is, you know, how do you feel today? I mean, we all, if you work out, you know, when you're done working out, you feel better. Everybody does. That's what moving does. So if we can teach that on the front end for kids, it will be very helpful to them for a lifetime, and it optimizes our ability to learn. So it's worthwhile, and it is worthwhile probably more frequently than we do it. Physical education provides lots of opportunities for kids to move, to be proactive, to use movement as a way to calm yourself and get ready to learn, and also opportunities to just calm and learn how to do that over time. So, and many of you mentioned a little bit about autism or sensory issues or issues with physical education. And a lot of schools are putting in sensory rooms, which is not something I'm going to talk a lot about today. But if you think about it, the fitness room or the gym in every building is a sensory room because it provides all sorts of input and opportunities for you to move. On exercise bikes, ellipticals, treadmills, yoga mats, jump ropes, exercise bands, weights, you name it. Also, phys ed provides lots of opportunities to practice social skills in a social setting, which lots of kids also need. Yeah. But anytime you activate both sides of your body, both half of your brain are working. So walking, look, left side, right side. Talking, I'm using both sides of my brain. So actually, we use both sides of our brains all the time when we walk and move. Almost every exercise requires us to do that. Lots of things that cross the midline are specifically really good. If you think, I'm pretty old, so when we did warm-ups in phys ed, everybody had to do them on a count 10, you know, down. We had the windmills. All of those very old things, guess what? We're not doing them as much. And guess what? Kids are having a whole lot of trouble picking up visual motor skills, following text on a line, crossing midline, because we've taken a lot of the motor out and said, oh, if we sit down for a literacy block of 90 minutes, that's better than sending them to phys ed. We don't have time for phys ed. So I don't know specifically what that exercise was, but most movement causes your whole brain to be involved. And it does cross the midline. Well, and there are lots of coordinate. So here's another one that's a coordination movement. So it's a three. So it's a out together together. So it's a 3 jumps. So apart together together, and then your hands go on a count of 2. So you do a 3 count for your feet, and then 2 counts for your hand, which is a coordination exercise. So I mean, there are gazillions of them. The point is, any movement, all movement, is good for your brain. Also, if you're starting to we just ate. If you need to stand up and move, please do. You know, keep yourselves comfortable. Okay, this is the legal stuff, and I was telling someone just before we started that I was not even sure that Iowa had a definition of special education that included what was in the federal definition. But we do in the administrative laws, and there's a link to the administrative laws in your Google Doc as well. This is exactly the same as IDEA. The definition of special education says special education, this is in the definition of special education in IDEA and also in Iowa administrative rules. And you'll have access to this PowerPoint as well. Special education means specially designed instruction at no cost to the parents to meet the unique needs of the child with a disability, including instruction conducted in classrooms and homes, in hospitals, institutions, and other settings, and instruction in physical education. That's in the definition of special education. Most people do not know that or don't pay attention to it. And it isn't on the Department of Ed's website as such. You'd have to find it in the administrative law. Then this is the definition of physical education in that law. It means physical and motor fitness, fundamental motor skills and patterns, skills in aquatics, dance, individual group games and sports, including intramural and lifetime sports. And the term includes special physical education, adapted physical education, movement education, or motor development. So those big long sheets that you guys have, take a look at those. On the front side, it's mostly blue. What this is, the front and back, this is a document from Shape America, which stands for the Society for Health and Physical Education. We don't have any standards in physical education in Iowa. Another great thing. We're the only state in the country that has no standards in physical education. We sort of have health literacy standards, not so great. In lieu of state standards, use the national standards, which are really good. So standard 1 is on the front of this, and standards 2, 3, 4, and 5 are on the back. So there are 5 national standards. This is the scope and sequence. So this is kindergarten through 12th grade, what kids should learn. They should learn all of this stuff. This is the whole content of physical education. And the scope and sequence is when should they learn this. So if you, the back side will give you the legend is E means emerging skill, M means a maturing skill, and A means applying that skill. So for example, the front side, the blue side, this is primarily motor skill acquisition. This is learning how to move. This is learning how to roll over, to creep, to crawl, to walk, to run, to locomotor skills, twist, balance, all of those sorts of things. And it will show you then when you're supposed to acquire those skills. The way this can also help IEP teams is, as you're saying, my student has unique needs. This is what all 6th graders are already supposed to be able to do, like all the stuff that's all blacked in. And my kid doesn't have any of those prerequisite skills. So it's like, oh, most of the IEP team, again, those are special ed people who don't know anything about phys ed. Your phys ed teacher should be on your IEP team with you. Make that person a partner with you. They're not paid to do that. Their assignments aren't, they're not weighted to do that. They're not given the help they need to do that either. But make friends with them, and this will help you and them know lots of stuff. So this is what phys ed is, yeah. Every district should have a physical education curriculum, and you should ask, what is that PE curriculum? Honestly, I was surprised. About 3 years ago, I did a survey in my AEA, and 16 of the 32 school districts didn't even have a curriculum in phys ed. I'm like, well, seriously, how is it that the administrators are evaluating their staff? You know, so it's like, hello, what are you teaching? Because I'm adapted physical education. I'm adapting the content, the instructional strategies, the environment, the equipment, and the assessments for physical education. But you have to start with great physical education, which starts with a curriculum. Right, what are they teaching?
So
what
I
are your
can't tell
units?
them, like, my child can't do that, or my
Right.
child can do this sort of, or
Right.
because I don't know, when you're teaching volleyball, what skills are you looking on this list?
Exactly, exactly.
If they can tell me that, then I can say the doctor says this is what should happen or not.
Right.
Instead, what's happening is they just say, oh, we're just not going to do it. She has to walk
Right.
instead, which makes
Right.
her bored.
Right,
You know?
and that's not a good solution. The other thing I was going to show you, and this you have a link to, and you can have this as well. This is also from Shape America. So this is from Shape America, the scope and sequence. On your Google Doc, there's also a link to grade level outcomes, which is that big, huge doc I just gave to Mindy. And that gives you each of the 5 national standards. It says, okay, what are the outcomes at each level? 1st grade, 2nd grade, 3rd grade, all the way through 12th grade. So that is available. And
that's what we need.
that's exactly right. And you also need to find out what's the curriculum that the district is using. Because like I said, half of my districts had no curriculum. And then it's like, okay, great, that is why dodgeball is being taught, or only, big ball competitive sports. It's like really what the curriculum should be. A huge range of diverse activities.
I wanted to learn the same things as the other way, and there's other
Right.
modified means there's other ways to do it.
That's exactly right.
She can't do it.
Well, and saying that the only setting she can do it in is the one that currently exists, that's also not true. That's right, and that's why as parents, you have the power. Special ed directors, a friend of mine said, Ann, he said, special ed directors are really not my friend. He said, because this is not a priority for the state, there also is no accountability. The only thing that is checked is one of those boxes on the G page marked? So if a box is marked, nobody checks to see, is the right box marked? Is what is marked even being done? Nobody checks that.
Well, because the other teachers have to give me graphs and like information, but I get nothing from Jim except calls all the time saying, well, she can't do this, or my child comes home in terrible pain because they made her do something she probably shouldn't have done.
And that's when you need to say to the phys ed teacher what would work. Because typically they have ideas that would work, but they'll say, but I don't have any time, or I don't have a smaller class. But then that is the administrator's job. That is not your problem that they don't have the time. And it's not the phys ed teacher's problem. That is a full-time equivalency problem, and that's a district problem, because that is their job. Okay, specially designed instruction. This means what I said on all of those things. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, my question is this: like, if your child needs to take an out of PE, like if we take her out of PE, that means she can't do like sports, like out of school. Like we have like volleyball team,
can't
basketball.
join a sports
You can't join the
Yeah,
sport.
but if you have an IEP, you should be able to say, no, I need these sorts of things accommodated, and maybe that rule doesn't apply, or this one would apply to that. So there has to be another way to do it, because for sure you don't want to be taken out of sports just because they put a hurdle, sort of a barrier in your way, right?
Right.
Yeah, so
We're working on it.
you need to chip away and work on it, exactly. You had a question too.
And
Here's what the regular PE is. Here are a whole lot of other options. All of that being said, our phys ed teachers in this state do a bang-up job of accommodating kids. So we have lots of fabulous solutions out there as well. But they do not typically have the support they need, the background they need, or the training they need. So, and those are things that you can help with as well.
Yeah, according to this, there's certain things that they teach, and along the way, whether the kids grasp it or not, and they continue to move along.
That's that's regular physical education, right? I mean, like in every subject. Literacy is like that.
Yeah, that's kind of the whole point of the whole thing, is that if you start at square A and the kid didn't quite grasp the concept, and you keep moving along, I mean, is there a checklist? You might have already addressed this part, but how is the kid then expected to do here when they didn't quite grasp here? Is there
Exactly. That's exactly the point. That's exactly the point. So maybe just placing the kid in the regular physical education setting that they don't have the skills for is maybe not the most optimal placement. So that's the point. One, prioritize what do you want your kid to learn? You know, is it to acquire those skills and be able to apply them? Is it to practice applying them? Is it to get friends? Is it to be better at fitness? Is it to understand for lifelong how I might be involved actively? But you're exactly right. That's exactly the point. So least restrictive environment, you guys know that term. You know, it says you should have access to the general setting, and it should be, the least restrictive environment should be something that the kid wants to do and engages in. So like this little guy right here, if they won't go in the gym or they're in a fetal position outside the door of the gym, do you think we have placed them in the least restrictive environment? Probably not. It's, you know, it's like, hello, they won't even go in. So it's not a problem with the kid or the student's behavior. It's a problem with the environment. They're not in the least restrictive environment, because if they were, they would be learning and doing and playing. And phys ed, just the physical environment of the gymnasium, it can be too bright, too loud, too smelly, too hot, too cold, too many people, too much unpredictability, where kids, I have students that will just, you know, they're up against the wall. It's because they didn't really know, the IEP team wasn't even sure what the general physical education environment really did look like. Mm-hmm. So there are a range of solutions. There are all sorts of things that can be done. So what I'd love you to do is make friends with your PE teacher, say, this is not working for my kid, and these are my priorities for my student. What would work? So these are just a few examples. So everything from, you know, around in the Des Moines area, there are lots of buddy classes or peer buddy classes. So again, all kids need to be exposed to everything in the content of physical education, but at their level and with the instructional supports they need so that they can be successful. So how would we do that? If you offer choices, just one general ed PE class doesn't really hit it. But if you had an opportunity to participate in a smaller group setting with peers, maybe that would work. What if there were choices and there was personal fitness that included yoga and individual fitness programs, that's a more individualized plan. So what choices are available? We had one young man in elementary school. He had a really significant anxiety disorder and Asperger's syndrome, and Thomas was a total toe walker, and he could not handle the physical education environment. There's the sound in the gym, he couldn't stand it, and nobody ever talked to his phys ed teacher about it. Because Thomas never went to PE, his para, his one-on-one, his para educator, instead of taking him in the gym if he would start to cry, she would just walk him in the halls during phys ed. So he never went to phys ed all through elementary school. And he got to middle school and he had none of the skills on side one, and it's like, okay, now what do we do? And middle school PE, there are 3 classes in the gym that all meet there at the same time. So 120 kids are thundering around in the gym. Well, hello, he didn't even want to go in. But it was like, and he would have meltdowns just because they said, you have to go to gym. And so then his behavior, he would have a meltdown that caused him to miss the academics of the rest of the day. And he's a really bright kid. So, it was like not a good situation at all. But the solution that happened there just by accident, and sometimes they happen by accident, is one of the 3 phys ed teachers happened to not be teaching. It was her prep time while Thomas was assigned to one of the other 2 classes that were going on all simultaneously in the gym. So that PE teacher was one-on-one with Thomas, who also had a para, and then that group of 3 joined the general ed class for the warm-up, stretching. Thomas did his warm-up walking while everybody else was dressing, so he didn't have to listen to all of that thundering. Then he joined the group for a warm-up. Then he went outside of the gym and practiced in a quieter environment, and then he had an individualized instruction. So he needed a one-on-one teacher and a para to be successful in the gen ed curriculum, and the kid learned how to play ping pong and asked for a ping pong table for Christmas, and now has a life skill that he does at church and the community. And giving kids what they need turns a big switch on that gives kids and adults what they need for life, which is joy of movement and appropriate settings. Call the phys ed teacher. Start talking to them, email them. Also, ask the principal, what is your curriculum? And ask for what unit are you on now? Series of units that they go through. So you should be able to find out what unit are they in. And the other thing I said is support and training for physical educators. These guys do want to do a good job. We have no state consultant in physical education at the Department of Ed. So address physical education in your IEP. Contact your phys ed teacher and include that person as a key member of your IEP team. And you guys meet on, and they won't tell you this again, but every year the IEP team is supposed to make a decision as to which box on the G page is marked. Not just say G page, it's at the G page, and we're almost done, and you've already been through A, B, C, D, E, F, then it's G. Nobody even wants to make a decision at that point. Your eyes are glazed over, and it's like, okay, so what I'm suggesting is on the B page, where it's present levels of performance, that you address physical education. If you have a concern about your student and the services they're getting in physical education, say what it is, and that needs to be on the B page. So get information from your phys ed teacher. What are they doing? Say, I need to know for the IEP. What are they doing? If the PE teacher can't make the meeting.
You're talking about like in the present levels of functioning kind of piece?
That's exactly right. On the B page of the IEP. So where it's preferences, interests, you want to also address physical education on there. My kid loves it, but they don't get to do this. My kid really hates it. My kid really needs to do this. I would love to see a lot more. If you could teach them yoga stuff to calm down, that would be huge. Any of those sorts of things. Also, a statement from your physical educator. How are they doing in PE specifically? And what measures do the phys ed teachers have? Most give fitness tests. Most have motor rubrics in their curriculum. So if the student isn't being measured by those assessments, then you have indication. But address that on the B page in the present level. which will lead you to which box do you mark on the G page. But you need to start on the B page. So what is going on in PE? And then what is the general setting in phys ed as well? So what does it look like? A lot of times they're just thinking, oh, well, it's just the other third grade kids. Well, sometimes it's a 3-4 combination. Sometimes 2 classes meet in the same place before they disperse. And sometimes that's the piece that uncorks the student and ruins the environment. So saying what that is and also addressing what's the impact of the disability on participation in physical education. If it's a developmental disability, obviously you might have some developmental delays. If it's an anxiety issue, too many people, too much stress, that will cause problems. If it's attention deficit hyperactivity, you know exercise is your friend, and it may be that this person needs PE right off of the bus, first thing in the morning, right before the literacy block. So where it's placed or the frequency as well can be addressed. So which box do you mark? And that's the page that you have. So this is what the boxes actually mean. What this box is on the G page, this line of the 3 boxes, typically what happens is they'll say, well, we just have general PE available. And so we only mark that box. But that is not true. Again, this is your opportunity to say, no, because this is not what program is offered. This is what special education services are necessary for your child to make progress in physical education. So it's the instructional program that they need. It's not what does the school have available, it's what does the student need. Based on their unique needs, what do they need? So general PE means you go to regular phys ed with all the rest of your peers, no problem, the PE teacher doesn't need to know a thing about it. You do whatever you need to do, you get dressed, you change, you follow the rules, you play the games, you are assessed using the regular assessments out of the curriculum, and you're making progress in that curriculum. That's general PE. Modified PE means you go to regular PE, you participate in the regular curriculum, you are measured by the regular curriculum, but you may need some adaptations or accommodations to make progress in that regular PE class. Okay, and it could be as simple as you have autism spectrum disorder and you don't get it, so for tag games we use a tag stick. Or you're a little slow, so we use tag sticks for everybody so you can tell who's it. And then you can change very quickly too. So the modification there it could be a piece of equipment, maybe it's an individualized warm-up routine, but there's a specific modification for your particular student, but they're still participating in regular phys ed and they are getting a grade based on what is being measured for all of the other kids in that class. Now, if that is not the case, if your student is not making progress in the regular PE class, then you mark specially designed instruction and you say what it should be. Because a lot of times they'll say, well, no, they're general ed. So I could have like a student with a severe, profound, multiple disability who is in a segregated special ed class most of their day. But then they say, oh, no, they're going to go to regular PE, and then they just mark general. And I'm like, well, I said, no, this student requires a number of special education supports at all times of his or her day. And regardless of whether you push that chair into a general ed setting or a special ed setting, this student still requires these supports. They go with the kid. So you have to separate the setting from what are the instructional supports. So if your student isn't making progress in the regular program as evidenced by your PE teacher saying, yep, ball's good, no problem, and you can always ask if you can go watch. So get in there and watch. If they're not, then mark specially designed instruction. It doesn't mean that they're in a class all by themselves or that they're only in a class with kids with disabilities. It means you get to, and the IEP team gets to, prescribe what the phys ed program should look like. Should it be a small group peer program? Should it be a small group in addition to PE with peers? Should it be daily? Should it be a shortened amount of time? Should it focus only on certain things? So you get to describe that. And then the F page then would describe where are those special education services being delivered. How much is in general phys ed? So many times, especially at the elementary level, kids go to adapted PE or a small group PE class to learn the skills and games that they're going to be doing in phys ed with their peers. So they're ready to roll when they get in there. They know what's going on. That's very beneficial. The F page then would delineate the time with peers in the general setting and the time that would be a specially designed setting that would be small group, not regular. And then you need to identify, so if your student is not making progress in the general curriculum as measured by that general curriculum, then you need to identify a goal. So what goal are they working on? So like when you say, what are they doing in here? You need to have some measure. You know, I want to know, are we measuring based on steps? Are we measuring based on engagement? Are we measuring based on, moderate to vigorous physical activity? Are we measuring based on fitness scores? Are we measuring based on trials? Are we measuring based on success? What is it? So what are we shooting for? Are we shooting for interactions with peers? What is it we're measuring in physical education? And so then the goal needs to exist for that. So use the IEP process. Involve your phys ed teacher in that process. Advocate for your child and his or her physical education teacher. Because like I said, the phys ed teachers, they do the best they can. Many of them have no supports. Most of the state has nobody even like me that, they're like, oh my God, Ann, I don't know what to do with it. And when I started 35 years ago, you could make a decision whether you wanted to be regular ed or irregular ed. And so phys ed teachers a long time ago knew, they had made choices to maybe go into physical education to work with high performers or coaches. So when I started a long time ago, and the law had just come into effect, they were like, oh, geez, I wasn't really trained to do this. And so they would back up against the wall and say, listen, Dan, I'm not wearing white for a reason. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. And it's true, they don't. So they need more training. But in the IEP, on the F page, you can say, my phys ed teacher needs an adapted physical education consultant. They need a specialist to help them. Yes?
So then, who should we contact? We should call our state representatives, or do we call the Iowa Department of Education, or do we call the...
All of those would be great. I'm working on all of those myself, but I would start right where you are. So if you're in a building, start with your principal. But yes, it's a statewide issue. It is not anything that is being systematically addressed. I'm hoping that because we have Shape America, the national organization for phys ed and health, that will help. We do have some guidance docs, and I have some meetings planned with Iowa AFERD, but for sure, which is the Iowa Association of Health, Physical Education, Recreation, and Dance, to begin to put some pressure. Well, I mean, there are a whole lot of things. I mean, teacher training programs, that's a big thing. Leadership at the state level in terms of motor, fitness, health, we have none. So legislators would impact that. Building principals in terms of making sure that building principals have enough FTE or full-time equivalent staff available for you to say, hey, this constellation of kids isn't working for my student. I need something different. And for them to actually have the latitude and flexibility within their schedule to reconfigure something. Because we are only limited by our imaginations in terms of what would work. And if I asked each of you or each of your kids, well, what would work? Or when PE teachers, I come in and they say, well, that doesn't work. I said, well, what would work? And they'll give me 5 or 6 things. I said, well, let's give some of those a try. So we have the solutions. We haven't had the will to really do it. But you guys as parents, if you put it on the IEP, it's legal and it has to be provided. Well, exactly. I mean, take a look. We don't have any state standards in physical education. Our Iowa core, we've got health literacy standards. There's one in there that speaks about fitness, nothing. So Minnesota actually has all of their rules and regs, and you'll have on your Google Doc, there's a PACER guide from Minnesota with an example, but they have in their state regs exactly what happens. And also, they do compliance studies on physical education and adapted physical education. They also require that you have a license called developmental and adapted physical education. In California, you can't teach adapted phys ed without having a master's in the field. In Iowa, you need 1 3-hour class, and that could be a really crummy class too. So it could have given you no experience. It could have been a great class, but it's still only one class. When you think about it, those are difficult teaching situations and instructional settings. When you have slim to no training in the variety of disabilities, and then when you think who comes into the gym, those phys ed teachers many times don't have any idea who even has a label when they come into it's just a kid. So they need your help and support, and you need theirs.
Encourage you though, I sat in on, were you here this morning with the two guys that came from Washington? And I was in their second round. And you know, one thing they talked about, because there were parents that want to know, how do you go about advocating it? And you were in there too. And so you chime in with me if I get it right or not. But the importance that, you know, I would start with your school. And I would talk to your principal, and I would, you know, he said, if you can create that relationship and not make it adversarial. Now, if you still get roadblocked, right is right. But start with your school, don't assume the worst. Maybe they don't know the law, right? And so
Assume that they don't. Otherwise, you have a power struggle.
Right.
So assume they don't and say, how can we change?
Thank you, Ann, you did a
Hey, thank you all. It's a beautiful day. I appreciate your time and attention. So thanks for coming in instead of being outside.